Welcome to the Fast Times News, your trusted source for breaking updates and global insights. Today we're going to be diving deep into a major development in the Ukraine war. Ukraine's first confirmed use of U.S.-supplied ATACMS missiles to strike inside Russia.
Right.
So we're pulling from reports by Reuters and the Associated Press,
Okay.
plus some insightful analysis from our own team here at the Fast Times News.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, this is a significant event.
It is. It's huge. Especially the timing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're approaching the 1,000th day of the war. This attack coincides with Trump's return to the White House.
Yeah.
I mean, both of those factors could dramatically reshape how this conflict plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's unpack this for you listening out there. Early Tuesday morning, Ukraine targeted an ammunition depot in Russia's Bryansk region
Okay.
with these long-range missiles. Now, that's about 70 miles inside Russian territory.
Wow.
And the reports actually differ slightly on the specifics here.
Okay.
Russia claims they intercepted 5 out of 6 missiles, while U.S. sources are saying 6 out of 8 actually hit their target.
Okay.
But regardless, we know there were secondary explosions reported.
Right.
So, suggesting a successful strike? I mean, this is a big deal, right? Ukraine hitting targets inside Russia with these advanced U.S. missiles, this seems like a major escalation to me.
Absolutely. I mean, Ukraine has used, U.S.-supplied HIMARS systems really effectively throughout the war. But
Right.
the ATACMS, they have a much longer range, which is why this is so significant. It demonstrates that Ukraine has a growing capability to hit targets deeper and deeper within Russia.
Right.
And that's bound to have both strategic and psychological implications, right? I mean, it just raises the stakes considerably.
Absolutely. And we're already seeing those implications play out in how Russia is reacting.
Right.
They were furious. Foreign Minister Lavrov is calling it a clear sign of escalation. He is accusing the U.S. of direct involvement.
Yeah.
They're even going so far as to suggest that American military experts must have been the ones operating the missiles.
Wow. What's the strategy there?
Yeah, what is the strategy behind that kind of rhetoric?
Well, you have to understand that the Kremlin has constantly pushed this narrative that this war isn't simply between Russia and Ukraine, but it's a proxy conflict with the West,
Right.
specifically the U.S. So these accusations, what they're intended to do is undermine Western support for Ukraine
Okay.
and portray the U.S. as the aggressor.
So how is the U.S. responding to all of this?
Well, the U.S. State Department has firmly rejected Russia's claims
Yep.
and their nuclear threats, right?
Uh-huh.
Calling it irresponsible rhetoric,
Yep.
emphasizing that there's been no change in the U.S. nuclear posture. So essentially, they're trying to de-escalate the situation while still affirming their commitment to supporting Ukraine.
Right.
It's a very delicate balancing act.
Yeah. It's interesting to me what Zelensky's response has been. He confirmed that Ukraine now possesses these long-range capabilities, including domestically produced drones and the ATACMS.
Okay.
But he's also emphasizing the need to force Russia to adjust peace.
Right. Despite the ongoing civilian casualties from Russian attacks. It seems to me that he's walking a fine line between demonstrating strength and acknowledging the human cost.
He is. It's a tightrope walk that he's had to maintain this entire time. Zelensky wants to project strength, wants to project determination while acknowledging that human cost of war.
Yeah.
What I find really revealing, though, is his mention of a resilience plan.
Right.
That includes developing even more long-range weapons, 30,000 drones, 3,000 missiles, just in the coming year. So this indicates that Ukraine is committed to self-reliance,
Yeah.
even as they receive support from the West.
Well, that resilience plan, and especially the ATACMS strike itself, seem to have really rattled Putin. I mean, he just approved some significant changes to Russia's nuclear doctrine.
I know, it's scary.
And here's where things get really interesting for me. They've essentially lowered the threshold for nuclear weapon use.
Right.
What does that mean for all of us for this conflict? Yeah, so it's a development that definitely raises some concerns. The revised doctrine allows for nuclear retaliation against attacks that are backed by nuclear powers, even if the attack itself is conventional.
Okay.
So this directly links back to the ATACMS strike.
Right.
Because Russia now considers any attack supported by the U.S. as potential justification for a nuclear response.
So let me make sure I'm understanding this correctly. We have Ukraine hitting targets inside Russia with U.S.-supplied missiles. Russia making these veiled nuclear threats in response.
Right.
And a revised nuclear doctrine that significantly raises the stakes of the conflict.
Yeah.
This feels like a powder keg situation.
It really does. This escalation, it introduces a heightened risk of miscalculation, unintended consequences. Both sides are pushing boundaries, testing each other's resolve, and all of this is unfolding against a backdrop of a shifting global landscape with Trump back in the White House.
Right. That's the other huge piece of this puzzle.
It is.
Trump has been publicly critical of U.S. aid to Ukraine in the past.
Yeah.
Now he's back in power. So it adds a whole other layer of uncertainty. We're already seeing international leaders and organizations like NATO and the EU expressing their concerns.
Right.
So what does this all mean for the future of the war? What about the possibility of peace negotiations?
Well, those are the million-dollar questions. I think in order to even begin to answer them, we need to consider how Trump's return might actually change the dynamics on the ground, you know?
Yeah.
His past rhetoric suggests he might be more open to negotiating with Putin, perhaps even at the expense of Ukrainian interests, but his actual policies upon re-entering the White House remain to be seen, right?
Right.
There's a lot of speculation, but no concrete answers yet.
So it's a waiting game for now.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, the war grinds on. The sources we've been looking at mention this ongoing fighting.
You're right.
Along that massive 600-mile front line.
Yeah.
Both Ukrainian and Russian forces are under immense pressure, and the situation is brutal.
It is brutal. You know, it's easy to get caught up in all this kind of geopolitical maneuvering. Right.
And kind of lose sight of the human cost of this conflict. Cities are being reduced to rubble. Casualties are mounting on both sides.
Yeah.
And winter is setting in.
Yeah.
That's going to exacerbate the already dire hardships faced by soldiers and civilians alike.
And then you've got the international dimension to consider as well. Our sources also mention North Korean troops being deployed to assist Russia. That's a new wrinkle that could really complicate things, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, the involvement of North Korea, it just introduces another unpredictable element into an already volatile situation. It raises questions about the expanding scope of the conflict, the potential for further escalation, even Pyongyang's motivations for aligning itself with Moscow.
So if we take a step back and look at the big picture for our listeners out there, we're dealing with a multi-layered crisis here. You have a direct confrontation between Ukraine and Russia. You have these escalating tensions between Russia and the U.S.
You've got a volatile global landscape and the wild card of Trump's return to the White House.
Yeah.
With all of these moving pieces, where do we even go from here? What are some of the possible scenarios we should be watching for in the coming days and weeks?
It's so tough to predict with any certainty.
Yeah.
But I think there are a few key areas to watch. First, we need to really closely monitor Trump's actions, his statements regarding Ukraine.
Okay.
Will he maintain the existing level of U.S. support? Will he increase it? Or will he pull back entirely?
Right.
His decisions are going to have a significant impact on the balance of power in this conflict.
Feels like Trump holds a lot of sway over how this could unfold.
Yeah.
What else should we be looking at?
Well, alongside Trump's moves, we need to pay close attention to the situation on the ground, right?
Yeah.
Will Ukraine continue to launch these long-range strikes into Russia? If they do, how will Russia respond, both militarily and diplomatically? And of course, the nuclear question still looms large, right? Will Putin's revised doctrine translate into concrete actions? Or is it primarily a deterrent strategy? These are all crucial questions that are going to shape the future of this war.
It really does feel like we're entering a new and potentially even more dangerous phase of this conflict. What do you make of that?
I think that's a fair assessment. You know, the ATACMS strike, the heightened rhetoric, the revised nuclear doctrine, all of these factors point to a significant escalation, and the stakes have definitely been raised.
So let's summarize what we've covered so far.
Okay.
We've seen a dramatic escalation in the Ukraine war, with this first confirmed use of U.S.-supplied ATACMS missiles to strike inside Russia.
Right.
This action has triggered a sharp response from Moscow, including accusations of U.S. involvement and a revision of their nuclear doctrine that lowers the threshold for nuclear weapon use.
Right.
The international community is understandably on edge.
Of course.
And the return of Trump to the White House just introduces further uncertainty into an already volatile situation.
A concise summary. The coming weeks and months will be critical. We all need to watch closely how events unfold, paying particular attention to the actions of the key players: Ukraine, Russia, the United States, and the broader international community. This is a conflict with global implications, and its resolution will have far-reaching consequences.
You've been listening to the Fast Times News, deep dive into the latest developments in the Ukraine war.
Absolutely.
It's a complex and rapidly evolving situation, and we'll continue to bring you in-depth analysis and breaking news as events unfold. But what does this all mean for you, our listener? Why should you care about a conflict happening thousands of miles away?
That's a question we should all be asking ourselves. This war has global ramifications.
Right.
It's impacting energy prices. It's impacting food security, geopolitical alliances. The potential use of nuclear weapons, even as a deterrent, creates a risk that extends far beyond the borders of Ukraine and Russia. It's a stark reminder of the interconnectedness of our world and the fragility of peace.
And what about the human cost? We've talked about the rising casualties
Yeah.
and the displacement of millions of Ukrainians, but it's important to remember that impact on individuals, families, and communities is immeasurable. This war is shattering lives and leaving lasting scars on an entire generation.
It's a humanitarian crisis of immense proportions. The physical and psychological toll on those directly affected by the conflict is unimaginable. And then there are the ripple effects, the economic hardship, the social disruption, the fear, the uncertainty that pervades daily life.
Yeah, it's definitely a situation that demands our attention. When we discuss these geopolitical events, it's easy to get caught up in the abstract, the
Yeah.
strategies, the power plays, but we can't lose sight of the very real human impact here.
Right.
I mean, imagine just being a civilian in one of these war-torn cities, living with that constant threat of bombardment, the uncertainty of whether you'll have food or shelter tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict.
It really is heartbreaking. And I think for a lot of people watching from a distance, it can be hard to fully grasp the reality of what Ukrainians are experiencing every single day.
Right.
But as you said, this war has far-reaching consequences that go beyond those immediate impacts. We're already seeing the ripple effects on the global stage, from energy prices to food security to shifting political alliances. It's an interconnected world, and this conflict is touching every corner of it in some way.
It is. Just think about the energy crisis in Europe, for example.
Right.
Russia's been a major supplier of natural gas to the continent, and the war has severely disrupted those supplies, leading to price spikes, shortages.
Right.
Or consider the impact on global food prices.
Yeah.
Both Russia and Ukraine are major grain exporters, and the war has disrupted agricultural production, shipping, contributing to food insecurity in many parts of the world.
Right.
These are just a couple examples of how this conflict is having a tangible impact on people's lives, far beyond the battlefields.
Yeah, and that brings us back to the nuclear question.
We can talk about energy prices and food shortages, but the potential use of nuclear weapons, even as a deterrent, just introduces a whole other level of anxiety and uncertainty. It makes this conflict feel much more immediate, much more threatening, even for those of us watching from afar.
Absolutely. It's a sobering reminder of the destructive power we humans possess and the fragility of the systems we rely on to prevent catastrophic outcomes.
Right.
Putin's revised nuclear doctrine has lowered the threshold for nuclear weapon use.
Yeah.
And that's a development that just cannot be ignored.
Right.
It raises the stakes for everyone, not just the parties directly involved in the conflict.
So what can we do?
Yeah.
It can feel overwhelming to think about these global issues, these complex geopolitical dynamics. Is there anything the average person can actually do to make a difference in a situation like this?
I believe there is. First and foremost, we can't let this become just background noise. We need to stay informed, engage in these discussions, hold our leaders accountable. That means demanding transparency, pushing for diplomatic solutions, advocating for policies that prioritize peace and stability. And it also means supporting humanitarian efforts to aid those who are suffering as a result of this conflict.
That's a powerful call to action. And as we leave our listeners with that thought, I just want to say thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the latest developments in the Ukraine war. It's a complex and challenging situation, but we believe that understanding the nuances is crucial for navigating the uncertainty ahead.
Absolutely.
Remember, you can stay updated on this and other global issues by subscribing to the Fast Times News on YouTube, liking this video, and sharing it with your friends. We'll continue to bring you the in-depth analysis and breaking news you need to stay informed in this ever-changing world.